So here's a fun little headline you might have missed last week. OpenAI, our friends at OpenAI, yeah, the company, they're building the tools to eliminate, well, apparently all of us. Anyway, it was announced last week that they were going to shut down, basically. Why were they going to shut down? Well, because everybody is, well, burned out. Apparently, when you create basically the world's most powerful engine for doing everything creative faster and easier, the result is, well, people collapse in a puddle of cognitive exhaustion. I mean, it's kind of like Elon, right? Canceling his mission to Mars because everybody needs like a juice cleanse or something. Anyway, it gets better, right? Because one of the reasons that they cited, that OpenAI cited for the company-wide timeout, besides everybody's tired of solving the universe problem, was that Meta keeps stealing our people. Yeah, Meta keeps stealing their people. I mean, come on, right? I mean, we finally officially gotten to the Silicon Valley custody battle phase of the AI arms race, where like, where's your senior research engineer this week? And oh, she's at Zuck's house this week. Don't you just know he lets her build her own avatar? And hey, Zuck, make sure she eats her vegetables and does her homework. And for God's sake, don't let her watch any scary movies. Anyway, I'm happy they're getting some rest, a week worth of rest. I mean, the irony is too perfect, right? The frictionless factory hits the brakes. And I think maybe that's something worth talking about on this show, because today's episode, well, it's a little different. As you can see, I'm flying solo. Joe's not going to be here. He's off doing something undoubtedly more productive and less philosophical, and probably, unrelated to burnout or algorithmic collapse. I mean, or he maybe just be hiding from me. I don't know. Honestly, I'm not sure which one I'd like to be the answer. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. See, I wrote a book. It's called Valuable Friction. And this episode is one of our experiments here. And it's what you might call, well, let's be honest. I'm your favorite of the two. It's a sneak peek into my book and to what's going on and how I truly do hope that it can help you. I mean, hopefully you can think of this episode kind of like a modern movie trailer, right? You know, the kind that you watch the movie trailer and now you kind of know the whole damn movie, right? I mean, I'm looking at you, Afterburn, looking at you. Anyway, okay. What I want to do is just provide some context, why I wrote the book, what it's really about, and hopefully what we're supposed to do now that everything we touch has been optimized into oblivion. Because I don't know if you've noticed, we are absolutely, as a culture, becoming allergic to any kind of effort. We want our food delivered, our news summarized, our feelings analyzed by an app, and the entire business strategy written by an AI that, doesn't need coffee or therapy or anything like that. And moreover, it's funny because we're more tired than ever before. I mean, it's almost like removing all the friction. It didn't actually make life easier. It just it makes life feels like nothing matters. And that's what the book is all about. It's not a rant. It's not a nostalgia trip for dial up internet and Joe's hideaway in Wyoming or whatever, or handwritten thank you notes. It's just a deep breath, like take a breath, right? Celebrate that today on this episode. So today I'll not only be the last word on this old marketing, but I'm going to be the only word, so I don't know. Let's roll.
Just remember, everybody has a story to tell. Tell it well. Of this old marketing.
And now, for your listening pleasure, here's Polizzi and Rose, covering the week of media, marketing, and digital content news. This old marketing. Take it away, boys.
Well, hello, friends, and welcome to This Old Marketing, proudly brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. And of course, I'm Robert Rose, and welcome to episode number 488 for Friday, July 11th, 2025. And with me as usual, oh, wait, he's not actually with me this week. Yeah, my pal, my colleague, and maybe the only man in America who doesn't know who Chit is at this point. Yeah, that's Joe Polizzi, but Joe is out this week. He's basically, I think what he's doing is he's secretly plotting the relaunch of the Tilt via some sort of cheese grotto subscription service. And anyway, I don't ask questions, but as I mentioned, it's just me. So I wrote a book and it's coming out in August. I'm going to be debuting a keynote and the book at CEX. So the book is called Valuable Friction. Now, it's been pointed out to me that I'm debuting a book called Valuable Friction at the CEX, the sex show. So, yeah, my inner 17-year-old went there too. So, just get it all out now. Get it all out. So, but let me explain what the book is actually about. And to start, what I want to do is I want to start with a joke that really came to mind and was really one of the sort of ideas that sort of inspired the whole idea of the book. Um, and so you've heard this joke before. So there's a religious man, right? And he falls into a deep hole and he's stuck, totally stuck, helpless. And he starts praying, God, help me get out. God, help me get out. God, help me get out. And pretty soon a guy walks by with a rope and he says, hey, let me throw down this rope and help you. And the man says, no, 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 thanks. God will help me. God will save me. God will get me out of the rope. And so then an emergency services guy shows up in an ambulance and has a ladder, and same thing. Guy says, nope, no thanks. God's got this. I've got it totally covered. I've got it totally covered. And finally, about a few hours later, well, a helicopter hovers overhead and drops a rescue line, and the man waves it off and waves off the helicopter and says, no, 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 God will rescue me. And after a while, he dies of starvation and thirst in the hole. And he gets up to heaven. He walks up to the pearly gates and he asks God, he said, well, God, why didn't you save me? I asked for you. I wanted you to save me. And God goes, what do you mean? I sent you a guy with a rope. I sent you a guy, an ambulance, and I sent you a damn helicopter. What did you do? That's the joke. So as I started this book, I was reminded of that joke because it reminds me about 25 years ago, we fell in the hole, right? We were trying to create something special with all this wonderful new thing called the internet. We were going to build an audience. We were going to tell meaningful stories. We were going to connect with those audiences, connect with people in ways that mattered. And this new thing called the internet was going to give us this new medium where we could explore how we engaged, we entertained, we informed our audiences. And then Google showed up and said, hey, I'll help you get there faster. I've got keywords and traffic and real-time data, and your audience will find you. And we went, yes. And then over time, they went, well, we were just kind of kidding about that whole thing. We kind of want money to be able to let them find you. And so, basically, we need your content to build our business model. But yeah, we'll take that money too. So they started charging us for the attention to that very content that we used to build their entire business on. But we didn't climb out of that hole. We kind of dug in. We went, all right, this is my life now. And the this is my life now meme kind of took hold on that. And we went, okay, let's go do that. Let's make it easy for them to do that. Then about 10 years later, Facebook came along and said, hey, we're going to help you go viral. We're going to help you build your community audience on our platform. We just need your content. You don't need that crazy old website anymore. You can build your content, build your community, and we'll be your digital town square. And we went, yes, again. And a little bit later, they went, yeah, sorry, we were just kidding about that too. We can't really reach your community here. We need an automated algorithm that's going to bury your content with whatever the meme of the day is so that we can optimize our advertising. And still we went, okay, well, I guess that's life now. And so we dug deeper and deeper still. And now here comes AI flying in like a helicopter, basically saying, hey, we'll not only write the content for you, you don't even have to be present. Just give us a prompt. I'll crank it out. And if you give us even more of your great ideas, more of your great content, you can build our business model and we'll cite you as references. Give us your best stuff. And we're like, amazing. Finally, salvation. You see where this is going. Next year, we're going to be standing in the wreckage asking the gods, why didn't you warn us? And God will be like, warn you? I sent you Google. I sent you Facebook. I sent you AI. And you kept saying yes. Maybe you just should have slowed down to say, maybe we shouldn't do that. That's the moment I kind of realized I wasn't writing a book about AI and content, which is where I started out writing this whole thing. It's about how we may have finally, as a culture, as a business culture for sure, as just a people, reached peak speed, where speed and frictionless ideas have become the founding basis by which all of our business strategy, culture, and even relationships have become. We have finally completed the journey to mistaking speed for salvation. We've optimized ourselves into a corner, and the rush to go faster and faster and faster, well, we've lost the one thing that actually makes our work, our creative work, and our lives ours, the willingness to be present in that process. And that is friction. So my book here, Valuable Friction, is about what happens when we stop trying to eliminate effort and start learning how to use it better, use it well. So when we stop seeing resistance as a failure and start seeing it maybe as a feature, it's about the power of slowing down on purpose, not to fall behind, not to worry about we're falling behind, but to actually notice where we're going, to create the things that'll have shape, that'll have weight, that'll have meaning, to figure out that we don't have to move as fast anymore. There's no rush to this thing. Things don't melt into the noise if we just wait on actually doing them. And I wrote this book because I'm kind of tired of pretending that faster is always better, hearing that from businesses, from teams, from marketing teams, especially. And I think deep down, once you start to see it, well, you might be tired of it too. So, okay, let me switch gears here for a second here, because why do I think we're now at this peak speed, right? This idea of peak speed. Like, why is now the time to start thinking about this stuff? Because I think you can feel it, right? I mean, I can feel it, and we can start to see some of the cracks beginning to form in this idea of speed being the founding sort of basis of all the value that we create. I've been talking a little bit with clients. I've been talking with friends about this idea of, the cult of seamlessness, right? The cult of ease, of frictionless, right? It's starting to see cracks in it. And you can even see it in art. You can see it in business. You can start to see it in the way that we treat things. This obsession with speed is starting to finally catch up with this, with the idea of seamless, always on, hyper optimized everything, right? It's kind of cracking. You can kind of see it when younger people, Gen Z, right? Young people, they're deciding now to ditch iPhones for flip phones because they don't want to doom scroll. All they want to do is be unreachable while they're listening to Olivia Rodrigo on vinyl, right? You can see it in the comeback of vinyl. You can see it in the indie bookstores, and paper planners are coming back with little gold stickers for your dentist appointment, right? Apparently now writing something down on paper with pen feels, subversive. You kind of see it in the fact that every AI generated blog post on LinkedIn now sounds like every other AI generated blog post on LinkedIn. But more importantly than those AI generated blog posts is that you're starting to notice those things. You're starting to understand. We're starting to understand and see and be able to spot where those things are really just not as good or well crafted as they might be. You can feel it when somebody says, now let's jump on Zoom real quick, and your whole body goes stiff because there's kind of nothing real quick about opening any kind of browser window and pretending we're going to be emotionally available for 20 minutes. So you see it in business now, right? The most interesting brands, some of the most interesting brands, they're kind of harder to interact with. They take longer to ship. They don't have a million options. And we're doing that even within ourselves as well, where we're beginning to say, you know what, it's going to wait. The job's going to wait. These brands are building wait lists on purpose. That's not failure. That's a new design idea. And we're quietly, I think, realizing that too much ease, too much convenience has sort of a hidden, invisible cost to all of us. When everything becomes too easy, too smooth, too fast, it starts to feel like it doesn't really matter. So I'm seeing basically obvious examples of this, and there are non-obvious examples of this. Because here's the thing. I'm not trying to make an argument here in the book and even here today that easy is bad or that convenience is, well, inconvenient. But I'm not suggesting that we abandon all technology, go up to Joe's mountain hideaway in Wyoming and go off the grid and do all of that and write handwritten notes, with newspapers and all of that, hostage notes and all that stuff. What I mean, it's the noticing, right? It's the question that we can start to ask, like, is easier and faster, is it actually always better? It might be easier in the moment, but what about the long term, right? Because we've been trained to not see that over the last 20 years, we've been trained to not see that idea that faster may not be better. I'll give you an example of this. So, in doing some research for the book, what I found was that back in 2017, Netflix, they introduced the now ubiquitous skip intro button. I'm sure you've used it. I've used it. Everybody's used it, right? So why did they introduce the skip intro button on your favorite shows? Well, they noticed that about 15% of people were manually fast forwarding through the first 5 minutes of TV shows. And you might hear that and go, okay, well, wait a minute. That means 85% weren't skipping the intro, and you would be right? But in Silicon Valley math, right, that 15% impatience equals to, it's a mandate. We got to build a feature. We got to build a feature for speed. So they built a button. And so when we think about it, right, what is the actual point. In other words, if that's the case, right, of building this actual, skipping 7 seconds or 2 minutes or whatever it is. And by the way, now we skip intro button. It gets pressed 130 million times every single day. So it's not like people aren't doing it. But we have to ask, okay, so in 2025, then why are the creators and producers of the shows, why do they still make those lush, cinematic, opening, wonderful theme songs, beautiful theme songs, memorable theme songs, all those brand visuals that go along with your favorite shows? And the answer is because they believe, they're artists, they believe, and I agree with them, by the way, that those few minutes, they still matter. They are the pause before the plunge into the show. They set tone, they set a mood, they establish trust. They tell you, settle in because we made this wonderful thing for you. It's an emotional tone setting pause. By the way, it also sets up credits for the actors, credits for the creators, credits for all of those things. But more than that, it is a tone setting idea. But here's Netflix, in the name of speed and user control, decides to go, yeah, we're going to make that moment optional. Let's shave the edges off and let people jump to what they consider the good stuff, right? Now, is that a helpful feature? A nudge in a UX idea? It is all, after all, optional. It's a little bit of UX magic, but in a culture that has now become allergic to any kind of friction, any kind of forced and idea, even the faintest delay feels like some sort of affront to our time. We've become to expect it, right? We've been trained to crave that skip button, not because it necessarily helps us, because we've forgotten how to have that anticipation and why it might be valuable for us. So there was a wonderful thing in 2022. There was an episode of the Still Processing podcast, and we'll put it in the show notes here so that you can go listen to it. So Wesley Morris and Hanif Abdurrahman, I'm going to mispronounce that last name, but anyway, they talked about this exact thing, the skip button, the skip intro button. And what they argued was that the opening credits, they're not just a design element that needs to be a mandatory. They're now a ritual, right? They don't just introduce the show, they introduce you back to yourself, back to an emotional muscle memory, not in that moment, but past, when it's when it's already happened. In other words, they don't just remind you that what you're watching, they remind you when you were watching it, what you were watching, and who you were at that time. And I'll give you an example of this, right? Because I feel that, I really do. I can still sing, much to many people's dismay, I can still sing the opening theme to the Bugs Bunny show, light the lights, and Star Trek. And immediately I'm 8 years old, in pajamas, eating cereal, and all of that stuff is life is good. They bring back sort of familiar connections with that cultural piece of art, that cultural moment. Those intros were friction. I couldn't skip them when I was a kid, but they mattered. They told my little kid brain good stuff is coming, and I still have visceral reactions to it. It's a good part of my life. Now that moment has been replaced by a button that says, yeah, go ahead, skip the setup, get to what you think is the good stuff, or what we think you think the good stuff is. And sure, it's technically still a choice, but those choices are becoming less and less thoughtful. And I'm not convinced we're better off for it. Like, I'm not convinced that we're better off for being able to skip that thing, where it's not a forced moment of friction to help us be better as people, as a culture. So my whole point wasn't just that I wanted to remove the skip intro button. I'm not suggesting that we should remove it. I just want us to start asking in those moments that we don't even give much thought to anymore, are we really better off skipping the intro? Because when we start skipping every pause and every buildup and every moment that doesn't scream for our attention, that doesn't put us in the way of a phone or a button, we don't just lose pace, we lose presence in life. We stop participating in any of the processes. And when we do that, we're not just losing our edge, our competitiveness, we lose our agency. And that's how we end up sounding like everybody else, doing exactly the same thing, doing what everybody else is doing, and saying exactly the same things in exactly the same way, at 1.5x speed, of course. But of course, it reminds me very much of something that Clay Shirky, the wonderful author, great author, said back back in 2010, truly this old marketing. And he said, quote, Abundance breaks more things than scarcity. Society knows how to react to scarcity. That's a really interesting idea. We've had a scarcity mindset for decades, for more than decades. Now we have so much of everything all of the time, and we don't know what to do with it. So, what do? We scroll past, we swipe away, we refresh, we repeat. Nothing sticks. And the result, we're exhausted, not from doing too much, but from doing too much that doesn't matter. This is why I think the next big thing in marketing, in business, in our lives, professional lives and personal lives, isn't going to be just about doing more. It's going to be about doing the right things and letting them take a bit longer, allowing them, making those decisions to take a bit longer. And that's when I got the thought. I get that, and maybe it's a reminder more than it's a thought, because this isn't necessarily a new idea, but and this is the ultimate punchline, I suppose, of why I thought I should write about this in this particular book, and why I'm actually saving the debut for CEX, which is, of course, a creator, an entrepreneur, a marketing type of conference, is that ultimately this is not just an aesthetic or a how to live your life better or something like that. It is a strategy. And as I see it as a strategy for how we can, as individuals, whether we're trying for a job, whether we're a student looking for a new position, whether we're an entrepreneur starting a new business, whether we're a marketing manager trying to, matriculate through a company and navigate our career, it's how we stand apart. It's how we differentiate and stand apart in the world. Because in a world where everything is seamless, friction might be the only thing that makes something feel different. And speaking of feeling different, well, it's time for us to pay the bills. I hope you're as excited as I am, because we have gotten so much wonderful feedback from our Pay the Bills segment, making commercials hopefully a little fun. And this month, for all of July, we're doing sort of our Southern rock. So it's time for us to pay some bills. You don't become the world's most valuable women's sports franchise by accident. Angel City Football Club did it with a little help from HubSpot. When they started, data was housed across multiple systems. HubSpot unified their website, email marketing, and fan experience into one platform. This allowed their small team of 3 to build an entire website in just 3 days. The results? Nearly 350 new signups a week and 300% database growth in just 2 years. Visit HubSpot.com to hear how HubSpot can help you grow better. You want a great podcast recommendation? How about Create Like the Greats, hosted by Ross Simmons? Each episode hosts an in-depth analysis of some of the greatest creations and creators of all time, along with a deep dive conversation on the creative process that went into building companies, brands, stories, and more. If you like learning about history, learning about the creative process, and are a laid-back person, you're going to like this podcast. You can find Create the Greats wherever you follow your favorite podcasts. Okay. I hope you I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I enjoy making those things because it's truly it's very fun to actually spend time doing that, making that ridiculous stuff. And I mean it's hopefully a good example of valuable friction, right? Making something that could be very simple and easy, just a little bit harder. Anyway, if you've made it this far and into the episode and you're thinking, all right, Robert, I get it. Friction is good sometimes, but like, what do I do with any of that? Right. So let me give you a little structure. So in the book, what I do is I'm talking about four kinds of valuable friction, not just like work principles, not just as a template, but what I think of as like human capacities. Right. And so here's the four. There's creative friction. That's the mind. It's the tension that makes ideas better, right? The blank page, that sort of thing. There's relational friction. That's the heart. That's their emotions. That's the messiness between people that builds trust and connection. Then there's operational friction, which is the muscle. It's the rhythm, the structure, the way that we do things, the way that we operate in the world and move through the world. Then there's strategic friction, which is the soul, our gut, right? It's what helps us pause, decide with clarity, and that idea. And so these aren't sort of abstract business buzzwords. They're things that we feel, the small daily moments that remind us that we are still human and have intention in what it is we're doing, living a life and our job and our strategy and everything we more fully. So let's go through each one of these just so you can get an idea, right? So creative friction, right? So this is the constraint. And a lot of people talk about how constraints are really good for creativity. I'm one that certainly agrees with that. The idea of instilling constraints, lines in our sandbox, sort of not just a whiteboard, but something that actually provides constraint when we go play and create, because that constraint can set us free, right? So, you're trying to write a social post and it could be as long as you need it to be. It's like, that's not as good to inspire our creativity. But if instead I had to write it with exactly 280 characters, now I have to craft something more. Or cooking dinner, right? You could simply order up a meal kit from Amazon and be like everybody else and sort of open up, boom, there's your templated dinner, right? You cook dinner. Or you can go look and see what's in your fridge and sort of create something and sort of, only what's in your fridge, create something really cool and innovative. That's the creative constraint. And it can be a pain in the moment, but what it does is that it starts to force originality. It forces the you to be more you, and it sharpens the edges of our creativity. This is why some of the best things in the world have happened. Things like punk rock and jazz and some of the, kinds of art that we've seen. Some of the best ideas show up in the margin of a meeting you didn't even want to attend, right? And so creative friction is what makes less become something. And I often talk about that idea and the idea of AI and content these days, with the idea that creativity is not going to be killed by AI unless we allow it to be, because we have the created thing, which is loved before it's even created. That's something that we get to experience in the creation of. And then there's the constructed thing, which is AI, something like that ad that I just did, right? So, which is it, I didn't love it before it was done. I just did it and used AI because it wasn't that important in my life that I actually create something from scratch. That's the difference, is that putting those constraints in helps us be more creative, and a tool can help us get there. Then there's relational friction, right? So this is a really interesting one, probably the hardest one, because it's the one that deals with humans interacting with each other and emotions. And it's really been interesting because we have really seen the sanding down of relationships over the last 20 years. Whether you point to the social media statistics of how we're lonelier now, we are, we're not dating as much anymore. We're not going out as much anymore. The physical experience with each other isn't as much. The relationships are harder. Circles of friends are smaller. So the relationships have been sanded down over technology. And, you can feel it even in the smallest things that you do, right? So you ask someone, how are you doing? And they go, fine. Or you go, fine. I'm fine. Why? Because that's the easy, unawkward way of just keeping things flowing and getting to the end of the conversation. And in other words, we don't go take a pause for a minute if somebody asks how we're doing and really think about how we're doing and say, well, no, I'm not doing that well, but thanks for asking, right? Or, because what is that going to do? That immediately puts the other person, in our mind, it puts the other person into they didn't really mean to ask how we were doing. They were just sort of doing the residual sort of thing. And instead, what if we took that little beat of discomfort and actually started to have those deeper sets of relationship? That's where connection lives, right? In other words, if you go to somebody and you go, "Hey, how are you doing?" And you go, "I'm doing fantastically well," which you would never do in sort of normal life, because it's like, I don't want that person to feel bad if I'm doing amazingly well, and so I go, "I'm fine." Right? But what if you went, "No, I'm doing fantastically well," which I'm doing so well, I don't want to talk about me. I want to talk about you, right? That's a different kind of introduction of friction, which is actually just slowing things down. It's pivoting. It's not sanding down the emotions and sanding down the interaction so that we can get through it faster. There's operational friction. That's rituals and the idea of what we do as an operational and movement through the morning or the day or whatever it happens to be, right? So, for example, every single morning, I do the same three things before I check email, right? And it's not because I'm looking at some productivity hack or that sort of thing. It's because it sets a rhythm for my day, right? Before my day dissolves into back to back Zoom messages and browser tabs and half eaten thoughts and sort of notes here and notes there, what I do is I sort of set myself a little ritual as a bit of a resistance at the start of the day to sort of say, take a moment and find out what's really going to be matter, what's going to really matter in my day. And it saves me hours of flailing later. The idea also, think about this for a second. One of my favorite things to do in a meeting, right, is to introduce the 7-minute pause into a brainstorming meeting, right? So you're in a brainstorming meeting and normally you just go and 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 whiteboard and go and go. And then the meeting's over and everybody sort of falls away. Instead, what I tend to do is in a brainstorming meeting, just in the middle of it somewhere, just random in some cases, but sometimes architected, is basically just stop and ask everybody to stop and be silent for 7 minutes and reflect on what has been said in the meeting, what's going on with their world right now, what they perceive. And why 7 minutes instead of 5 or 10? Because it's the oddly specific and makes people think about it and stop for a moment. Then coming out of that 7 minutes, maybe take 3 minutes and actually ask people to share their reflection and then begin the meeting again. It's starting and stopping. It's introducing some operational friction. It's not meant to introduce bureaucracy. It's meant to introduce some architecture into making people take a moment, take a minute, right? Not always get through things in the most frictionless way possible. And then there's strategic friction, right? This is a gut check and it's slowing down the bad ideas, right? You're about to send that email or approve the budget or launch that campaign that feels just a little too fast, a little too reactive. And maybe your gut goes, maybe we shouldn't do this just now. Well, it's listening to that gut, right? And sometimes in writing, we call this the 24-hour rule, which is right. You write something and then let it sit and come back to it 24 hours. And does it really then represent what it is with you? Right? Thinking about strategy for a minute. Instead of having AI just spit out that strategy, maybe let's use AI to actually create a strategy that you pretend there's a question mark at the end of every single prompt, right? In other words, it's not helping you get to a strategy faster. It's helping you slow down and actually think harder and wrestle more with your ideas so that you get to a better strategy ultimately. It's not about going faster. It is about getting to better. This is your inner GPS basically saying, let's not confuse motion with meaning. So there's a lot more, and I go into a lot more in the book in terms of examples and the ways that they look and the way that they manifest themselves. And I go into some sort of ideas for you to actually introduce this into as a means of differentiating yourself. Because ultimately, differentiating yourself is the way that you operate, the way that you move through the world. Anybody can copy your look. Anybody can copy what it is that you create. Anybody can copy your creative ideas, et cetera, et cetera. But what they can't copy is the way that you purposely move. They can't copy you. They can't copy the way that you purposely move through the world, the way that you communicate, the way that you create, the way that you strategize, the way that you create relationships. And in a world where not everybody's going to do this, this could be the way to actually differentiate everything you do. And in the book, I go through some ideas here, right? How students can differentiate looking for a job, how a marketer might differentiate looking, by introducing this idea of slowing down, of choosing with care. So, because friction honestly is where the human stuff is hiding, the real stuff, the messy stuff, the part that doesn't honestly scale very well, but sticks. And so when you learn to spot it, when you start noticing it and using it, you're not just making your better work, you're making kind of a life that feels like it's yours worth going through. So, okay, maybe at this point you're basically saying, all right, I'm in, right? It sounds kind of cool. What am I supposed to do now between, now and well, like when your book drops in August, right? Like, what am I supposed to do next week? And that's fair. I mean, you could, call me up and tell me you're going to pre-buy it and do all that kind of, I'm kidding. I'm not even ready to start marketing the thing yet, which is its own challenge. And trust me, I'm well aware of that. I'm going to have a newsletter and do all the things and have a site and do all that stuff. I'm going to be doing all of that. And that's where I'm going to be busy over the month of July for sure. But if I'm honest, what I really, really want you to do, and the reason that I wanted to make it one of these special episodes is because I just want you to start noticing. That's all I've been doing over the last few months as I've written the book, as I've sort of written my notes down and thoughts down over the last year, really, but over the last few months is just start noticing, hey, am I skipping this? Am I listening to this podcast on 2x speed? Why am I listening to this podcast on 2x speed? Is it because I want to get through it faster, or because I still understand it, but I can get through it and be more efficient? Or is it actually making my life better? Or am I skipping the intro button? Or am I doing something that is basically trying to get through life faster and more efficiently without having the stop and smell the roses moment, right? Where we can actually stop and think and notice and do things. And I've started noticing the places where I've reached for speed simply out of habit, simply because I'm trained that way by the people who want me to move faster. And I've noticed how often I skim instead of read books these days, right? And sit with the words and reread a paragraph. And how often I reply to a text message or an email message before I actually think about what it is that I want to say. Or how often I start solving a problem before I've even really defined the problem. And I've started to practice just a little, letting those moments breathe a bit, slowing down, because I don't think we need to go much faster than we can go today. I think we have the tools. And that's what I really believe, that automation, AI, technology, and the modern benefits that we get out of all those wonderful things actually give us the invitation to do. Give us the invitation. This is God coming down and saying, hey, I gave you this tool. I gave you that tool. I gave you this tool. It's an invitation not to keep speeding up, but it's an invitation to slow down. Let's take that invitation and let's actually slow down and create differentiated plays. So, what are a couple of places you can start? Well, pause for 7 seconds before responding to your next email, a text, a comment, anything. See what happens when you don't react immediately, but just pause for a moment and sit in that uncomfortable moment. Make one thing in your life slightly harder on purpose, right? Light a candle before you write. Write a one thank you note that you're going to go out. Instead of dashing it off via email or a text message, write it out by hand. Go find a card, write it by hand, and actually think about what it is you want to write, and then write it out by hand, and then send it with an actual post, right? With a stamp. Walk instead of scroll your phone just once during the day. It doesn't have to become your new identity. You don't have to lose the relationship with your phone or anything like that, but just do a daily walk without your phone and see what happens if you sit with your thoughts. Ask somebody a question that doesn't fit, right, in a normal conversation or in a meeting or something like that. One of my favorite things to do in meetings where we're doing status updates, right? And it's, especially because those things can get rote on a longer project. But in a status meeting, maybe you could go, hey, let's all share something we've been sitting with, but we haven't decided anything about yet. Like, what's something you're sitting with and trying to mull over in your head, but you haven't decided one way or the other yet? Give it the awkward silence. And by the way, don't make any decisions about it. Just actually understand what it is people are wrestling with. Or take inventory of your autopilot. Like, what's frictionless in your day right now that maybe shouldn't be? What are you skipping right now because it's efficient, but it's also kind of joyless? So I'm not trying to romanticize struggle. I want to be clear about that. Some friction should absolutely go, right? And there's real value there. There's a reason that we invented spell check and espresso machines and grocery delivery apps and Uber and all of those things. Not everything has to be smooth either, though, right? Some things could and should take time. They should be inconvenient. It should make us want to stop and say, is this still the way I want to live and work and create and lead? So I hope the book is going to give you the full framework, the full idea, the question, the big stories, the models, the exercises, the 4 forms of friction. But for now, maybe just pick one thing to notice of a designed pause and live with it a bit, because it's not a theory. I'm not trying to brand this thing. I'm not trying to do a start with why thing or anything like that. I'm just trying to ask us to stop and take a breath and notice it. It's going to be a small book, right? It's not meant to be this big tome, world-changing thing. I'm just hopeful that it can help you stand apart, help you differentiate, and help you live your life a little differently, because it's worked for me. And I've started to think about it and really practice it, and I'm really enjoying it. And okay, well, that's it. I hope you dug this. I hope you dug the episode. It's the end here, and Joe's going to be here next week. And I'll be here the week after that talking about something else. I haven't figured out what I'm going to talk about yet, but I'm going to think about it. Joe's going to be here next week. I don't know what the hell he's going to talk about either. But for now, until I see you again, 2 weeks from now, just remember, everybody, it's your story. Tell it well. And I will see you in 2 weeks on This Old Marketing. Hey, thanks a lot for making it this far in this week's episode, and thank you all for being a part of This Old Marketing. You can check out all the show notes of what we talked about today at thisoldmarketing.com, and it's also where you can leave us a review or a voicemail. We need those reviews and comments on whichever platform you follow us on. And if you haven't followed the podcast, please go do that and make sure you catch the latest and greatest episodes every Friday morning. We're on Apple and Spotify and all your other favorite podcatchers, of course, but we'd love it if you went over and subscribe to us on YouTube. That's right, YouTube. youtube.com/@thisoldmarketing. We'll see you again next week, folks, with another episode of This Old Marketing.